I do have one question to get the ball rolling, so to speak. And this actually is addressed to Rupert, and it sort of relates to something he was talking about. Rupert, this says, I think, why does the undifferentiated awareness split itself off into separate characters on the screen? Is it because it just wants to enjoy the movie as we do ourselves when we go to the cinema?
Do we need
Sorry.
Why does the undifferentiated screen separate itself out
Why
into...
does the undifferentiated awareness
split itself into different characters?
Is it just because it wants
It's a
to enjoy the movie?
very easy question. The answer is it doesn't. So to elaborate on that a little bit, let's go back to the screen image because it's easier to, the screen metaphor, because it's easier to explain like that. Remember that the screen is an aware screen. It is the screen that is watching the movie that is appearing on it. From the screen's point of view, which is the only real point of view, pure awareness, is the only one that truly knows, no separate self or object ever comes into existence. It's just itself, vibrating as the totality of all experience. It is only from the illusory point of view of one of the characters in the movie that considers itself to be a temporary limited self that the rest of experience is experienced as a collection of temporary limited objects. In other words, the separate object, other, or world is only such from the illusory point of view of a separate subject. But from the point of view of the one who truly knows, the only one that knows experience, which is pure awareness, it only ever is and knows itself alone. And the totality of experience, all thinking, all sensing and perceiving, that's all there is to experience, thinking, sensing and perceiving. The totality of that is only made of the knowing of it. And we are that knowing. It never knows or comes in contact with anything other than itself. Why is there duality? There isn't.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask the panel the same question I asked Tony yesterday. I've had this feeling for quite a while that everything's everywhere all the time. So it's a slight elaboration on the question I asked Tony. So, is causality an illusion?
I think each one of you should have a go at that, so we'll just start
Causality is an illusion for awareness. It is not for the separate self.
I think maybe the best answer for me is quite a traditional one. Yeah, it is and it isn't. How does that work? Well, let's use an analogy, the analogy of a nighttime dream. In a nighttime dream, there is causality. Maybe I go to the station, I get on a train, the train goes to Birmingham, I get off the train in Birmingham. It's a pretty boring dream, that one, but nevertheless. Maybe on the train I play chess with a tiger, perhaps. Let's make it a bit more interesting. So there is clearly causality in the dream. I got on the train to Birmingham, I got off in Birmingham. The moment I wake up, it's seen that there was no causality because nothing happened. There was no train, there was no Birmingham, there wasn't even a tiger with whom I played chess.
Can we tempt you, Jeff?
Have these aren't switched on?
No, for this recording. If you want to say something, Rupert or Rossi, that's fine.
Go on, have a go.
Have a go. Oh, that's good. I think this word illusion is so misunderstood, misused. I think it probably helps to define what the word illusion means. You know, I think a lot of people, when they hear the word illusion, they hear non-existence. You know, is yesterday, is time an illusion? You know, when I drop this microphone and it falls to the floor, you know, it seems as though opening my hand caused blah blah. You know, so so illusion actually means, it's from the don't know, Latin, Greek. It means it has a sense of something being a play, like something having a deceptive appearance. That's what it means. So illusion doesn't mean non-existence. It means deceptive appearance. It means it's not what it appears to be. That makes it, you know, that kind of clears things up. It appears to be such and such. Yes, of course, we can honor the appearance of causality. Yes, there appears to be yesterday and tomorrow, and I do this and this and that. Yeah, of course, so we can honor that. So the appearance is there. We can honor it, but it's just not what it appears to be. It's you know, it's like a wave may at first appear to be separate from the ocean. And we can honor that. We can honor the unique expression of that individual wave. Upon closer inspection, we don't find a wave separate from the ocean. So it's the separateness of the wave is an illusion, in the sense that the wave appears to be separate, yes, and yet upon closer inspection we find it's not. So sometimes just knowing like the real meanings of these words helps clear, because otherwise you keep on thinking in terms of, does it exist or not, yes or no. It becomes very dualistic, you know, yes or no. It's you know, that's what the mind is. It so yeah. You're abandoning us. Running away.
Hi there, and thank you again for a wonderful set of conversations. My sense is that you would probably all agree that whether it's in the room or the conscious awareness screen, that things can occur that are very painful and hurt. And there are some things, I mean, there's just one story that this week I heard about a young child that was kidnapped or taken, and their eyes were taken, and in China. And when that comes into the room, my sense is that from the way you've described the screen and the room, it just allows that to occur, because it does. And it's just hard to be with that. And yet that's the room we all are part of. So I'm just interested to know, how do you respond to that? I'd like to know your response too.
Do you want to?
Oh, who are you talking? Yeah? Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't, you know. That's a great place to begin, just to stay with that. Sometimes, we look out at the world and we see these things happening, and you know, children's eyes being taken, and it doesn't make any sense. And the mind is desperately trying to rationalize it, like why, and how, what kind of universe, is it a good universe, a bad universe? And then we even start to use non-duality to push away our own pain and our own sense of, you know, powerlessness and helplessness, but maybe it's not supposed to make sense. Maybe it's not supposed to make sense. Why does it have to make sense, you know? What I'd also say is that, you know, although I was talking before about the room and, you know, it's a metaphor for who you are, that the contents of the room is constantly shifting and changing, thoughts, sensations, feelings, perceptions, and whereas the room, I think I was saying that the room, you could say, is allowing all of this, is allowing. So, in that sense, your nature is love. In that sense, your nature is unconditional allowing. I mean, there's so many ways of talking about it: unconditional love, acceptance, so many words. So, the violence begins when we forget our nature. We lose touch with our true nature, which is naturally accepting, naturally loving. Who you are doesn't have to try to be loving. It is love. You know, it's when we forget our true nature, that's where the suffering begins. That's the origin of suffering and violence. Because ultimately, when we forget our nature as the room, that's the beginning of the war with the contents. So then we start to go to war with our own feelings, our own pain, our own sadness. And then that spills out into violence towards others. What we can't be within ourselves, we will not be able to be with in others. It's the mechanism of evil is quite a simple mechanism. Yes, it's like scapegoating. What I secretly want to destroy in myself, I will try to destroy in you. But that's only because I've forgotten who I am. So that's where what we call evil in the world. It's not about good versus evil. There is forgetting of our true nature. That's what's happening. There is forgetting of our true nature is what's happening in the world. But then you could also say from the ultimate perspective, which some teachers speak from, you know, even the forgetting of our nature, even the gouging out of eyes is, and you have to be very, very careful when you talk about this stuff, even that's life. Yes, of course that's life happening, but that's also, at the same time, that's stemming from a forgetting of our nature. You know, so it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense, but then it's such a beautiful invitation then just to sit with our own feelings of helplessness and powerlessness and grief, and to really, can we begin to see that even those parts of ourselves, even the grief and the sorrow and the not understanding the world, what we are is vast enough to even hold that, and that's what begins to heal the world. That's where the true healing comes from, is when we begin to remember who we are, but don't wait for anyone else to do it. It starts with you. That's what I would say. Sorry for talking for too long.
When we hear of an incident like this in China, we suffer with the people that are involved. We suffer with the child, we suffer with the child's parents, and we suffer with the perpetrator of the act. And the word compassion is often misused or mistranslated in our culture to mean to feel sorry for. It doesn't mean to feel sorry for, it means to feel with. Compatio, from the Latin, to feel with. So when we feel with another, whether we feel their joy or we feel their suffering, that is what compassion is. It is to have it is to feel another's feeling as if it were your own. So, for instance, in friendship, just in intimate relationship or any relationship, to be able to really communicate to one another and to listen to one another is compassion. It is to feel together. So, this is a very extreme incident that you mentioned, but we immediately feel with all parties concerned, and what we're truly feeling is below the physical pain, the physical horror of the act, what we really feel is the core wound of separation. That is what we feel deeply, not just in the child and the parents, but the woman who undertook the act. It's this act springs from a core wound, which is the turning away from ourself, the apparent veiling or ignoring of our own nature. And that is the root cause of such an activity. And when we read something like this, we feel that I feel it as much for the person that undertook that did the act, as for the parents or the child. All suffering is an expression of the primal wound of separation, the apparent turning away from the simple knowing of our own being, in whatever form it takes: sorrow, grief, despair, loneliness, the longing for love. All of these are modulations of the same core feeling, the apparent overlooking of this simple knowing of our own being, its simple knowing of itself as it is. And therefore the true healing, and in fact the only real healing, is to cease overlooking the knowing of our own being, to return to the heart, to know ourselves as we truly are. All psychological healing, all therapy, all healing comes ultimately from there.
I'd say that all questions about suffering come down to three, and two of them are easy to answer and one of them is impossible to answer. And the three questions are, there may be a fourth one, but if there is, I haven't heard it yet. What can I do about my own suffering? That's an easy one, because there are lots of things waiting to be done if I want to do them. What can I do about the suffering of others? That's the second easy one. If I want to do something about the suffering of others, there's an awful lot that I can be getting on with. And the third question is the why question, which, like all why questions, can only be answered by making up a story. So the third question is why suffering, which can be expressed in lots of different ways, but ultimately comes back to that, why suffering? So there's no way of answering that question except by making up a story, and it's quite clear that if we look out there, there are dozens, hundreds, probably thousands of different stories that have been made up to answer that question. And they're all stories. And so we're left, as I was saying this morning, we're left with the unknowable. One of the most difficult things for the mind about what's been talked about here over the last 2 days is that virtually everything is unknowable. This is known, and everything else is unknowable.
Thank you.
Hi. I wonder if any of you have anything to say about the embodiment of what we've been talking about. Obviously, the I energy exerts a huge toll on the body. It wears it out. I wonder if you've got anything to say about the qualitative, kinesthetic difference between having a body that's inhabited by the I energy with its seeking and one that is not.
All I'd say about that is I'd repeat something I said this morning. that what we're talking about here is an energy shift. It is not a change in a way of thinking. It's not in a change in the ideas that might inhabit this apparent mind. It's an energy shift. Now, anything can happen. There are no rules and there are no guarantees. But there is a tendency in that energy shift for at least some, if not quite a lot, if not maybe possibly all, of the neurotic energy that the body-mind system tends to contain to go poof, to dissolve, if you like. And I think all that I could say, even vaguely sensibly about that, is that with that neurotic energy reduced or gone, life gets easier. It's kind of, again, it isn't rocket science. One of the things that makes life most painful is our neurosis. I say our neurosis because as long as we're there, it is our neurosis. So if that neurotic energy diminishes somewhat or disappears completely, life simply tends to flow more easily. I wouldn't say any more than that.
If I were to ask everyone in this room if you know that you are ever-present awareness without limits, open, empty, knowing, many of us would put our hands up. If I were to ask the question, how many of us feel that we are sitting on a chair? Many of us would put our hands up. In other words, there is a discrepancy between what we understand at the level of the mind and what we actually feel in the body. I know that I am ever-present awareness without limits, but I feel that I am a dense, located physical body. And it is this discrepancy between our beliefs and our feelings that is responsible for the position that many people find themselves in. I've been studying the Advaita teaching for 20, 30 years. I understand it all clearly, but I still feel that something is missing. And what is missing in this case is that the understanding, the experiential understanding, has not been taken deeply into the body. It has remained at a conceptual level. To feel that the body is dense, solid, located, is to feel in a way that is consistent with the belief that I am a separate, temporary, limited awareness. And once it has been clearly understood in our actual experience that we are not such a temporary, limited awareness, there is a further process. I know it's not politically correct in these circles to talk of a process, but there is a further process in which the residues of separation in the body, which are by far the larger part of the sense of separation, are first exposed and then dissolved. So, under the spell of ignorance, and I don't mean that pejoratively, I just mean when the true nature of our experience is ignored, we tend to feel that awareness is like the body, dense, solid, located. In understanding, it's the other way around. The body is progressively felt to be like awareness, open, empty, transparent, loving.
Yes, great question. Sometimes you hear awakening talked about as some kind of end point, like a finishing, like it's a finishing point. Actually, in my experience, awakening, and when I say awakening, I mean remembering myself as awareness, as the room. In a way that was just the beginning. We could call it a process, we could call it a ever unfolding moment by moment discovery, whatever you want to call it, but only the mind would talk about endpoints, and only the mind would say, I've arrived, I'm done, and I was stuck in that for many years. I really thought I really had this idea that I was fully awakened, or I was fully enlightened, or I was no one now, or whatever conclusion. The mind loves its conclusions, and what you are could never be a conclusion. We're not talking about a conclusion here. This is, in a way, this is the end of all conclusions. This is the end of all conclusions. So in my experience, yeah, politically incorrect and all that. Screw it. So there was this initial kind of, you might call like awakening. There was this remembering, I am awareness. I've always been awareness. What I am has never changed. I am no one. However, the mind kind of later tried to frame it. But I realize now, it's taken me a long time to be able to say that was just the beginning. Actually, that wasn't the end. That was the beginning, because it was almost as if my center of gravity had now shifted from the contents, from identification as thoughts, feelings, perceptions, to now knowing myself on the deepest level as awareness, as the room. And it's not that I didn't forget that sometimes, because I did. I think that's one of the misconceptions I think about away. It all sounds so easy, when you read about it. It all sounds so easy. I've never met anyone who hasn't sometimes forgotten their true nature and got caught up back in thoughts, back in feelings, but for me it was like over the years, and it's a continuing thing. It has to be, because there is no conclusion. There can't be a conclusion. So it's it's like that center of gravity shifts to your true nature as awareness, as the room, as conscious, whatever, and now it's like all this stuff, that your whole life you haven't wanted to face, haven't wanted to touch, all the lepers, all the unwanted, the shameful parts of yourself, or what we previously called the negative aspect, or the dark aspect, what we previously kind of labeled as negative or dark. Actually, now there's just more and more space for all that stuff to start coming to the surface. I guess you could call that embodiment. It's really the same thing as Rupert was saying. It's awareness. It's not that there's this pure, clean screen called awareness and all these horrible impurities. It's not actually awareness, or whatever word you want to use, or awareness, life. Takes the shape of, whatever is arising. So, So I guess what started to happen over the years was, just all this stuff started to come to the surface. But now I was more and more, I was losing interest in running away from it. I lost interest in becoming enlightened and becoming this. All I wanted to do was meet life. And if life was taking the shape of pain, great. If life was not great, but I would have to meet that. Not even great. If life was taking the shape of grief, okay. If life was taking the shape of fear, okay. But it's like that meeting. I just, that there was just this willingness just to meet, and this is like, this is awareness too, this is awareness too, and how could that ever end? Because you're only ever going to meet awareness. This is also God, or this is whatever word you want to use. So that's you could say it's an ongoing process, but the paradox is there's only this moment. You see, so it's a process that's always happening now. So I think the mind gets caught up. Is there a process? Is there not? Is awakening an event that happens and then you're done? Or is it a process, and eventually you'll become fully processed? And then one day you'll be fully 100%. No, it's now. And knowing that whatever arises is none other than than that, even if you forget that sometimes. But then even the forgetting of that, even if you find yourself in a moment and you feel completely lost and you've completely forgotten, you feel that you've completely forgotten awareness. Awareness seems like it's a million miles away, it seems like it's an infinite way away, and you just feel this homesickness. Then you see that even the homesickness then becomes an invitation. No, whoa, I'm still here. I take the shape of homesickness. That's the shape I am taking now. I would even take this shape to remind you. Life is the guru, it's the constant guru, and it will take any shape. And it will even take the shape of longing for, so it's, I mean, I don't use the word embodiment, but maybe that's kind of what you're talking about. It's this constant meeting, yeah.
I think we've got about 5 minutes left, so...
I'm not going to talk again.
Yeah, I don't think anyone here doubts what you're talking about, what metaphors you're talking. Dreams or it's awareness or your real self or whatever. But to come back to the child that's suffering, if I was that child, what would you say to me today? The child that's lost his eyes. It's a dream. Be with your real self. What would you say to that child? Each one of you.
The child was very young. It would not be appropriate to reason with the child. You give the child a big hug. You'd meet the child where it is. You'd wait to see what the child says to you. Depends what the child says to you. Depends what the child asked its mother the question, "Where's the sun gone?" You'd explain. Simply because it asked that question, the child asked that question. You wouldn't go in to visit the child with a view of indoctrinating it with Advaita and telling the child its experience was illusory. Of course not. There's no teaching unless there's a question. The non-dual teaching is drawn out of silence by a question. If there had never been questions, there would be no teaching. So a so-called teacher or friend or communicator or whatever you want to say doesn't come to a meeting like this with a bag full of special knowledge that he or she wants to disseminate as if you were giving a maths lecture or something like that. You come in empty, just knowing your own being, with no agenda, with nothing not to persuade anyone of anything, not to convince anyone of anything, and you respond. So it depends what the child asks. You do your very best in that moment when the child says something or asks something. You tailor your love and your understanding, such as it is, to the specific needs of the moment.
Yeah, so there's a compassion.
Yes, you feel the child asks something or says something, you feel, you go to where the child is, you become the question, you become the child, you feel what they are feeling, and there's a response to that. It might be words, it might be a hug, it might be an ice cream.
Yeah, I think you're answering the question that we're wrestling with before about suffering. Thank you.
It's too hypothetical a question. Something would happen. Something happens, there's a response. But the mind absolutely loves to ask this sort of question, to tie itself up in this sort of way. What should happen? What would happen? If this happened, would it be appropriate? If that happened, would it be inappropriate? It's just too hypothetical. Something would happen.
Yeah. It's like Rupert, I have no idea what I would say or do in that moment. But the sense of it would be, child, even though your eyes are broken and the sun has gone missing and you feel violated and hurt, and you long for rest, you long for home. I am here. I am here. I am here with you. I'm not, in this moment anyway, I'm not here to try to change you or fix you or give you lectures about non-duality, or it's like absolute validation of where they are, you know.
I think it's helped everybody, I think, that previously when we were wrestling with it, there was almost a denial of suffering.
Yeah.
The child is certainly suffering.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the true healing can only begin from that place of absolute meet them. Don't try and philosophize your way out of suffering. It's too easy. It's too easy, especially when you haven't had your eyes gouged out. It's too easy. You know what I mean? This is about absolute humility in the face of life. You are that child with their eyes gouged out. So do not turn away. Do not turn away. You're only seeing yourself. You are only seeing yourself.
That was what was missed earlier on, I think.
Yeah, it's so easily non-duality becomes just a way to avoid a broken heart.
Can be a good game.
Yeah, for a while.
I'm really sorry, but I think we are going to have to end there. So look, I want to thank very much indeed on your behalf Richard, Rupert and Jeff for their talks today and for agreeing to take part in this little panel session. I'd like to thank on your behalf James and Lisa for their contributions. Thank you to Louise and Eleanor and Alicia from King's for looking after us so well with upstairs with reception and all that. Thanks to Will and Ben for helping us get this down on tape. Well, it's not tape, but you know what I mean. On your behalf, I'd like to thank Boris for coming up with the idea and really inviting all the wonderful people we've had here today and yesterday. And most importantly, I'd like to thank you all for coming. As you know, this is the first time we've done this. I think there's nothing happened that makes us think we might not try and do it again. So please do tell us what we can do better, what you like, what you don't like. I'm assuming you probably like microphones that work rather than ones that don't work. So yeah, thanks a lot. Go home safely, and thank you very much indeed.